print, email, Facebook, Twitter. More. Lloyd Rayney unfit to practice law after disgraceful recordings. False evidence. Tribunal. Perth barrister Lloyd Rayney is facing the prospect of being permanently banned from practicing law for unlawfully recording his murdered wife's conversations without her consent and giving false evidence about it to a court hearing. It comes just months after Mr. Rayney won a multi-million-dollar payout for being defamed by WA police, in decisions that were suppressed until now. The State Administrative Tribunal, SAT, described Mr. Rayney's conduct as disgraceful and dishonorable, saying it was satisfied he was not a fit and proper person to engage in legal practice. The SAT found Mr. Rayney had engaged in professional misconduct by knowingly giving false evidence on oath to a 2009 magistrates court hearing when he said Corinne Rayney knew, and consented to, the recording of about 9 of her conversations on a handheld dictaphone between April and July 2007. The Rayneys' marriage was breaking down at the time, and Mr. Rayney claimed in his evidence that he made the recordings to try to refute an insinuation his wife was making about him, and that he had copied all of the conversations onto a CD. However, the SAT found that evidence was untrue, and that when Mr. Rayney gave it he had the intention of misleading the court. It also found he had contravened the Surveillance Devices Act when he made the recordings, and that he knew he was acting unlawfully in recording private conversations without Ms. Rayney's consent. The recordings were made in the months before Ms. Rayney disappeared in August 2007 after attending a boot scooting class in the suburb of Bentley. Her body was found days later in a deep grave in Kings Park. Mr. Rayney always denied having anything to do with her death and was found not guilty in 2012 after a lengthy Supreme Court trial, with the verdict later upheld on appeal. The recordings were seized by police as part of the investigation into Ms. Rayney's murder. However, Mr. Rayney claimed they were subject to legal professional privilege and should be kept confidential. Rayney's actions not isolated. Tribunal says it was during a court hearing into his claim for privilege that Mr. Rayney gave the evidence the tribunal has now found to be untrue and misleading. Mr. Rayney had submitted he should receive a fine, or be suspended for a period of time, arguing that at the time he made the recordings, he was suffering stress and grief from the strained relationship with his wife as well as the death of his father. He also argued he was stressed when he gave the evidence in court because he had suffered great trauma. Mr. Rayney's lawyer told the tribunal his client genuinely believed his evidence was true and correct, although he did accept his recollections of his dealings with his wife may have been mistaken. However, the SAT said his actions were not isolated, because he repeated the false evidence in prior proceedings before the tribunal in 2015 and the Supreme Court during his 2017 defamation case, and again before the tribunal in this matter. It is our view that Mr. Rayney lacks the honesty and candor that are essential attributes for a legal practitioner, it said in a written judgment. The SAT ruled it needed to impose a penalty that adequately meets the need for denunciation of Mr. Rayney's professional misconduct, personal deterrence and general deterrence. We cannot allow personal matters to override our fundamental obligation to provide appropriate protection of the public interest in the honesty and integrity of legal practitioners and the maintenance of proper standards of legal practice, the tribunal said. Appeal lodged against SAT findings. SAT recommended Mr. Rayney be reprimanded and a recommendation be made to the full bench of the Supreme Court that his name be removed from the roll of persons admitted to the legal profession. The making of the recordings consisted of a premeditated and sustained breaking of the law over a period of months demonstrating his disregard for the law, the tribunal said. Mr. Rayney has already lodged appeals against the findings by the SAT and its recommended penalty. Mr. Rayney was awarded $2.6 million 5 months ago after a judge ruled he was defamed by police when, in the weeks after Ms. Rayney's death, they named him as the prime and only suspect. Print, email, Facebook, Twitter. More.